Let's move on to main topic number 2. And our second main topic today is sent in to us from Gregory Voigt, who writes, so Toy Story 4 opened with an estimated $118 million this weekend, which is fantastic, but it is below Disney's $140 million expectations. Fandango reported that it was outpacing Incredibles 2, which opened to $180 million in pre-sales. I know that more people use Fandango to order tickets in advance today than at this point last year, but this number feels way lower than it should be. Did the number of pre-sale ticket buyers really jump that much in the last year? All right, thanks for sending that in, Gregory. And a couple of issues there. The first of all, we of course got to talk about is that, of course, Toy Story 4 comes in number 1 at the box office. Not only did Toy Story 4 come in at number 1 in the box office, it is the biggest opening for a Toy Story film ever. Now, Toy Story 3, which joined the $1 billion club, opened to $110 million on its opening weekend. Toy Story 4 outpaces that with $118 million. Does that mean it'll get to $1 billion? Not necessarily, but we'll get to that in a second. The thing that's raising a lot of people's eyebrows over this is the fact that, early tracking numbers from Disney themselves had them expecting about $20 million more. So probably about 17% more. They were kind of expecting in the $140 million range for the opening weekend on this. Patted on top of that, a lot of these reports about advanced ticket sales for Toy Story, even outpacing some of the biggest animated films like in Incredibles 2 and what have you. So what happened? Well, personally, I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind here. Item number 1 is this, is that yes, exponentially more and more people faster than ever are now starting to use online advanced ticket sales. And I would say it's not just growing at a certain pace, it's growing exponentially. I feel like every time I go to the AMC Burbank 16, which is one of the busiest movie theaters in the world, every time I go, week after week, that line at the box office is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It's not that fewer people are going to the AMC Burbank 16, it's that more and more people are wising up and buying their tickets in advance. Even more than last year. So I think that has a little bit of something to contribute to it. Number 2 is this. As a family film, while I do believe there is a growing trend in the movie-going habits of the average fan to go more and more front-end heavy, go opening weekend, go within the first 3 or 4 days, there is that trend. That is happening in the film-going business. However, I also believe that movies like A Toy Story, these family films, they tend to lend themselves to not have as much of a rush on it as, say, a Justice League or an Avengers or a Star Wars or a Godzilla or whatever, right? I think for the most part, family films, particularly animated family films, lend themselves a little bit more that there's not quite the same rush to get out opening weekend as other films do. So I think that comes into play here as well. I still think, though, that the focus here needs to be on the fact, not so much that it didn't hit the expected number that Disney wanted, which was $140 million. I pegged it at 145. So I was off by like 18 million. But here's the key thing, or like 28 million. Here's the key thing. The key thing, though, that I think everybody should be focused on is the fact that it is still the largest opening in the history of the franchise. And the fact that the last film opened to less and it still joined the $1 billion club. So I don't think there's anything to worry about. The other thing here, too, is I think Disney has become a little bit of a victim of their own success. Any other studio puts out another animated film like this, and it hits nearly 120 million on its opening weekend, fireworks are going off. Fireworks are going off across the sky. Everybody's partying, everybody's popping bottles, everybody's celebrating, dancing in the streets. Yay. But this is Disney. We've now become accustomed to a Disney film, be it a Lucasfilm, a Marvel film, a Pixar film. We've become accustomed to a Disney movie opening, and it's some ridiculous number. And look, 118 million is still a ridiculous number for the opening of an animated film. But with all the success that Disney has had, I think it's adjusted our expectations for what we expect we should see from the opening of a film like this. So I don't know. So bottom line here for me, Gregory, is that there's no one, smoking gun here. There's no one magic bullet here. It's not one thing, whether it's the increased number of people who buy tickets in advance, or whether it's, I think people have a little bit more patience for how quickly they go to see an animated film, or whether it has to do with the expectations that come along with a Disney film at this point. I think it's a number of these things all kind of crammed into one. The most important thing here, of course, is that Toy Story 4 is a brilliant movie. It's fabulous. I mean, I've never seen a film address like heavier, more existential questions. Like the basic premise of this movie, without giving anything away, is this. It asks the question of several characters in the movie. Who are you when the thing that you've wrapped your whole identity up in is suddenly taken away? When there's a thing that you have wrapped all of your identity up into, and that thing is then taken away, what's left? Who are you after that? And it poses that question in several different ways to several different characters throughout the film. And it just makes it one of the most beautiful, thought-provoking, moving movies I've seen in a while. It's brilliant. And it made $118 million opening weekend. Not as big as even Disney was expecting, but huge nonetheless, and still more than the last film that still went on to make $1 billion. Will Toy Story 4 go on to make $1 billion? I'm not sure. But John, you just said that the last film opened to less and it made $1 billion. Why did you say you're not sure if Toy Story 4 will open and hit, that open bigger can hit $1 billion? Well, because of this. There is still that trend that more people see front end loaded and movies don't have the legs that they used to. And the last time a Toy Story movie came out was 8 years ago? 7, 8 years ago? The patterns of movie going has changed. So I'm not sure it's going to hit $1 billion. It's going to be a massive, huge hit. It already is a big, huge hit. But I'm not so sure it's going to hit $1 billion at that point. Anyway, what do you guys think about all that? Do you think 118 is a great result? Do you think $118 million opening weekend is a disappointing result? And do you ultimately think a Toy Story 4 can still get up there like Toy Story 3 and cross that $1 billion mark? Or maybe it's still going to be a big hit, but it's not. The $1 billion club isn't in the cards. Jump down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right.